never won.
Hello, everyone. So thank you for being here. I'm sure that all of you, whether you're an entrepreneur or an investor, have had to, at some point, deal with the media and have asked yourself, what's the best way to tell my story? And so we are very honored today to have such a wonderful group of journalists with us who will tell us what can get their attention to your story. So we have with us David Gilbert from Vice, Mike Butcher from TechCrunch, Jacqueline Simmons from Bloomberg, and Federico Guerrini from Forbes. So I will start by asking you, what's the best method to pitch you? Should I call you? Should I email you? What's the best way?
For me, email is always the best way to pitch me initially, at least. People have tried to pitch me with tweets, by cold calling me on the phone, on LinkedIn, on dozens of other different platforms, on Facebook. But email is the best way to do it because to get across what you want to say, you can do it in an email the best, I think, because it allows you to pitch your idea in sufficient, 140 characters on Twitter won't do it. And it's for me, it's the way I check my email constantly, so it's what I like to get pitches by.
Okay. Maybe. Mike, I know you like when people call you, especially late at night.
Late at night, yes. It's fantastic getting a phone call just about midnight. With the butcher. Well, I think there's the obvious ones is in person, right? Number one. But if you can't do that, I think actually a lot of the time the way to reach journalists is getting a warm introduction from someone who already knows the journalist, and the journalist sort of thinks they're okay, I guess, and you get a warm introduction that way because just cold pitching is quite difficult. I think in TechCrunch we're obviously assaulted by startups all the time, and we're totally, that comes with the territory. We're totally fine about people just contacting us, and you can email tips@techcrunch.com, and that actually does get read. Funny enough, even though obviously thousands of emails go in there, quite a lot of it does get read. But the best way is, identifying the title you want to reach first, identifying the journalist you want to reach, getting a warm introduction or meeting in person, and if failing that, you've got to kind of, go for the email, mike@techcrunch.com, join the party in my inbox, and do something simple. But sending 7 pages of information doesn't really excite anyone. It's best to, do a quick intro. We're working on this. This is something that interests you, or this is coming up, whatever. But also news. Just existing is not enough, really.
Right. Actually, I often talk to my clients, and you have a wonderful presentation on how to pitch the media, and you say the fact you exist isn't news.
Not really.
Which is something that I think a lot of companies need to understand, because most people don't understand that.
We're asking a journalist if they've got time for a catch-up.
Yeah, got time for coffee.
No, is the answer.
Jacqueline?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I don't actually think that email, it doesn't work for me. I don't always read my emails, and I don't actually get the spirit of a pitch through an email. So I really think that, we're dealing with, at Bloomberg, we're talking to thousands and thousands of companies that we cover every day. News is moving really fast, and I think that the most effective way for me is really to get the introduction, but talk to the owner, talk to the executive, talk to the CEO, look into their eyes, hear their story, hear their narrative, get their pulse. Because no one's ever going to pitch a story as well as the person who owns something. So what we do is we tend to encourage, there is a natural suspicion, sorry to say this, of PRs. That's just the way it works. There's conflicting interest sometimes between what reporters are looking for and what PR people are providing. Those differences can be bridged, but I think the most useful Relationships are one where you're able to kind of get behind the scenes and get to the person who's really driving the strategy of a company, who's making the decisions. So for me, it's the ed boards, it's bringing them in for on or off the record, background briefings, and really just hearing the narrative. It inspires a lot of great ideas, and that kind of nails the angle and the pitch.
Mm-hmm. Federico?
I'm much more old-fashioned, I'm afraid. I still read a lot of your emails. I do not answer them all, of course, but most of interesting things that come to me come through email. And yeah, of course, it depends how the email is made. Maybe we'll go into that later. And I also use Twitter. Sometimes people send direct messages or just try to tweet you and say, oh, look at this. Huh? Also LinkedIn sometimes. Could be useful. I don't use Facebook. I hate when people contact me through Facebook for professional matters, so I try to avoid.
Because you find it as more of a personal platform?
Yeah, I find it more as a personal platform. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have so many ways to chase me, you don't have to invade my Facebook.
I'm completely opposite. I hate LinkedIn. It's full of spam, people trying to sell you bizarre things. I just thought I'd wanted to make you know something or blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, as a journalist, it's different.
It's full of recruiters, and it's full of rubbish. And actually, on my bio on LinkedIn, it says, do not contact me on LinkedIn. Here's my email address. And weirdly, I'm the opposite. So I use Facebook tons, and probably because I travel a lot in the Middle East, and there, Facebook is basically everything. It's email, LinkedIn, it's messaging, it's everything. Mm-hmm. And continental Europe, Middle East, anyway, a lot of the international places, they just use Facebook for work all the time. And I'm used to it now, so
yeah,
whatever.
I think one of the most important parts of pitching is knowing what interests the writers, right? I mean, for example, I'm not going to pitch someone who is totally not into fintech, a fintech startup. And so I would love to hear what stories interest you the most to write about?
To me, I think you sent one of the questions through before this panel was, what stories would you never write about? I don't think there's any story or topic I'd never write about. It's all about, is it an interesting story? Is it something people want to read about? Is there an interesting narrative? For me, I write quite a lot about tech, about cybersecurity, but I write about a broad range of topics. And if you do look at what I write, I guess that's the best way to get a sense of what I like to write about. And I understand it's hard sometimes for a PR company or for companies to really know if this is going to fit, but if you're able to kind of just get in touch and make a pitch, I know a lot of journalists give out about receiving pitches that are completely wrong, but most of them understand that if there's an interesting story in the middle of it, there's a chance that they'll get picked up, I think.
He's absolutely right. You've got to read the title you're pitching to. If you don't read it, you've got to actually find the title that's writing about what you're doing. So, you get crazy pitches, and it's because they're not actually reading the title.
I would say there's three things. There's so much disruption going on with policy right now that I think that any pitch that can sort of loop it back to the bigger picture, that can sort of give the backdrop to, some of the changes that are going on in markets and governments and policy, and sort of loop it back to, this is why you have to care about this business change now, or this is how my business or my idea is, going to disrupt this space, given what's happening in the background. So I'd say policy and its impact on business and innovation is one. And I'd say the other one, two areas that I look for is, tech. We have a tech vertical at Bloomberg that is run from San Francisco. That doesn't sit in my group, but I have a swath of industries, that are directly affected by technology. So, automotives, healthcare, consumer. So when, for example, a CEO of a very large, global food company is standing there yelling at me because of coverage, of how we're writing about junk food they make and how they're making nutritional products to fix the problems caused by junk food, and then telling me what you really need to be looking at is how food is being disrupted in terms of breaking apart molecules and making the perfect food that doesn't make you fat but makes you healthy. I'm thinking, okay, that's an interesting story. Because you're basically telling me a traditional industry that's being completely disrupted and changed by X. I'm interested, and I'd say the third area really interested in is diversity. Looking at how talent is being shaped, changes in the workforce, how companies are looking at their hiring practices and changing it to make it more reflective of a diverse workforce. There's a lot of appetite for that right now.
Yeah, as for me, I'm more interested in pitches that have a story with a human side. So either it's the person that has been through a peculiar experience related to tech, of course, but I'm not interested in pitches that just speak of a product or marketing. I need a story, So, and for me, the story is made by people, by humans. And also, when technology is involved, I try to find an angle that's really could improve the quality of our life. I'm not interested in saying, we have the next selfie app. And not to despise them, of course, they do their job, but it's not my cup of tea. So one thing probably that I would suggest to people pitching me or other journalists before make some research and try to find out what their interests are, what kind of articles they write, what's their personality, basically. Mm-hmm. So we are people, right? We are not just an email address, so we are talking to one another. And so it's a waste of time if you just send me a pitch that could be good for Mike or for others. So
I mean, this is the fantastic thing about Twitter these days is because so many journalists use Twitter, you can basically see what they did, 5 minutes ago or an hour ago, what they're talking about, what they're interested in. I mean, and if you go and look at the Twitter handle of a journalist that you want to talk to, you can see what they're basically interested in at the moment, and maybe even interact there and maybe have a bit of a conversation. And maybe they'll think, okay, maybe this person's actually smart. Maybe they've got something to say. They'll follow you back. You DM. You end up having a story written about you because you're able to engage and have a conversation. And it's a fantastic public platform that didn't exist before, which is amazing. But I think one of the things that we're all looking at right now, all of us, and you mentioned that in your thoughts about the wider background, is that we're all talking about cybersecurity now, because Trump and the administration in Washington has completely thrown everything up in the air, and you've got thousands of people going into the US now who are having their phones confiscated, the devices looked at, passwords looked at. We're all absolutely desperate to cover this right now. And right now, personally, I'm looking for a startup that can allow me to turn my phone into Happy Mike. Mike that looks totally innocent before he crosses the border. And then you switch it back to Evil Mike or whatever afterwards. And I need a startup that does that. There's a lot of startups that do what they call BYOD, bring your own device, in business, so that you can separate your phone from your business stuff, your personal stuff. Now, that's going to be an explosion of work in that area because of what's going on in the wider security world right now. And it's just an enormous story. And those are the companies that so you've got to be, if you want to be in the news, join the agenda, because that's what we're all doing right now.
Right. No, I think that's a really good point, is the fact that you have to make your story timely, right? You have to make it interesting enough. And you don't always you're not always going to have company news to tell. You need to find an angle, something that people are talking about, and somehow connect your story to that.
There's a reverse to that, though, when you get pitches, when people are trying to crowbar themselves into what's happening in the agenda, and they've got absolutely nothing to do with it. And that just, you kind of have to assess each situation, and if you can add something to the conversation, then yes, pitch that. But if you can't, just stay away, because it'll just have a negative impact on how people perceive your business, I think.
Completely agree with that. Yeah. If it's forced, don't do it.
Yeah.
So what would be like the top 3 tips you would give someone pitching you?
I think number 1 is don't try and pitch the same story to Vice, to TechCrunch, to Bloomberg, to Forbes, because it just doesn't work. Yes, you can, if you're a PR, you can promise your client, I'm going to try and get you into everywhere, and you'll end up getting into nowhere. Pick 1, 2 maybe, and whether it's a blog, whether it's you're looking for the business angle, whether you're looking for kind of a unique inside story, just focus on 1 or 2, and then, as Mike said, go and research the journalist. And journalists are the only people using Twitter and Donald Trump. And people put everything on there, and you can find out what they like, whether they're serious, funny, and it's very easy to pitch them, or not very easy to pitch them, but you can get quite a good sense in it. So I would say definitely number one is focus on your target audience. Do you want to talk to TechCrunch crowd, or do you want to talk to Vice crowd? Because they're quite different readerships, I think. Yeah. The second one is don't oversell. If you oversell, and I pitch the story to an editor based on what you said, and it turns out that you were just kind of hyperbole, then I'm never going to cover you again, probably, because it's just really annoying. Is that 2 or 3? That's 2, I think. That's 2. Enough, probably. I think they're the 2 main ones for me, anyway.
Mike?
I don't think there's not necessarily a right way sometimes, because perhaps you might be the most boring person in the world and have quite a dull product, but it might be actually transformational at that moment in time, and maybe you don't really know. Sometimes you just don't know. But, I mean, like I said earlier, warm introductions are much more useful, I think. But I think the way to do it is really to sort of do what a journalist would do, which is to really tell a story. Here's a problem. Describe what the problem was or the background. A lot of entrepreneurs often create their company because they're scratching their own itch. They've seen a problem and they really passionate about solving that problem, and or maybe something happened to them in their life, and there's a real sort of interesting maybe backstory to why they're trying to solve that problem. And I think if you can do that, then you'll pique the interest of the journalist in the sense that there's a story here. Just going straight in, we do X for X, Y, blah, 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 doesn't really kind of set your world on fire particularly. Starting with the problem, what you're trying to solve, gives you someone a bit more context to understand what you're doing. Just a general thing. Yeah,
I think for me, it's really explaining how do you differentiate yourself? What's special about you? Because there's an app for everything, and there's hundreds of thousands of people creating startups every day, and it's so. How did just a small example? I was downstairs earlier. There's 2 teenagers who pulled me aside to pitch me on their education-based app, and I quickly found myself. It's like, that's cool, but, what about you? What's your story? What's your narrative? I'd also add, I think I'm very drawn to tales of woe. So failure, sort of like from ashes to, the monument is the example I use. Everybody wants a story that they can empathize with. And I think, those kinds of stories humanize and kind of bring it to life. So any opportunity to get in front of, again, the principles and to really kind of empathetically and with passion sort of set up your narrative will have a better shot at a better story, basically, and sort of a better narrative around what point you're trying to make. And then I'd say the other thing to really avoid is just spamming. I think I'm on a timed weekly message by one consultant, trying to get me in front of their innovation head. And I will get to that person, but, it's not going to be now. So probably hounding is not maybe the best.
Yeah, as for me, as I said, as I get a lot of emails and try to read them, the subject, the title of the email, it's crucial. So pay a lot of attention to that. And this could make the difference from one email that you read and another. And as I said before, make some research about who you are writing to, so what are his passions. And also keep it short. Keep it short because we don't have much time, unfortunately. Yeah. And please avoid all this pre-made stuff like, we want to democratize the access to, we're going to disrupt. Okay, sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's, but most of the time it's overselling, like you said. So, yeah. You get so many of them that
right. Changing the world.
Yeah. So what's the best pitch you ever got?
A guy sent me a wooden box once. Totally
a wooden
weird.
Box?
A wooden box which had no information other than open me, and I had to find to like figure out how to open this wooden box. Eventually opened it, and of course there was a press release inside. I mean, come on. I can't even remember the name of the company now, though. But it did stick in my memory as like one of the weirdest things that's ever happened.
Was there a point to the wooden box, or?
No, it was just kind of like fuck with your brain, basically. Oh my God, what the hell's going on? There's PR companies do all sorts of stupid things to try and interest journalists, don't they? And okay, when I worked in an office regularly, don't so much now, I'm often on the road, you would often someone would have a bright idea in a PR agency to send journalists a cardboard box which was extremely light. And you go, what on earth's going on? You open up the cardboard box and a balloon would float up with a press release attached. I mean, it was like, oh my God. Somebody's had this idea several million times over. There's just so it's funny because you immediately start talking about the bad ones, not the good ones, because the good ones lead to good stories, right?
Right.
And actually, I think that it's quite fun to, journalists are interested in finding things out. That's the kind of people they are. And if it's all on a plate, I mean, you wouldn't really do the job. We're interested in finding things undercover or hidden a little bit, which is why I say it's so important to really know what's going on right now in terms of the news agenda and pitching. The perfect pitch often doesn't necessarily exist because it's often about what's going on right now. But I think just being human and normal is the best approach. Trying to come up with crazy gimmicks I think the best
pitches have occurred again in the ed board setting when you have the owner or the CEO of a company really, peeling through the layers. So, for instance, we had the CEO of a major pharma company saying, I'm going to cure diabetes within a decade. I'm like, oh, I want to know more. That's a story. They ended up pushing back that target, but still, I mean, it got my interest. Or another pharma executive saying, we're building a connected lab, and this is going to revolutionize the way that, lab and pharma companies operate, how science works. That was actually a really nice story. Or the time when a media executive says, the UK is about to introduce rules that will disclose how much women get paid at companies versus how much men get paid. And it's telling me how much angst, that's causing the CEO, who happened to be a woman, about sort of disruption internally that's causing because the new changes and everybody's going to know. So it's those kinds of, you don't know you're being pitched to, in fact, and you walk away thinking it's like your idea. But those are, in fact, the most effective, best pitches. So again, it's human contact and just discussion.
Yeah, I think if you get an email and you read the first two sentences and you just stop and you go, okay, this story immediately, then that's a good pitch. Mm-hmm. It's obviously that's not an easy thing to do all the time, but if you can kind of think why rather than what, I think is a good way of going about it, because you have to say to yourself, why would this journalist be interested in the story, not what am I talking about? It's why. The why is kind of the crucial thing, I think.
Yeah, it's very important to catch their attention
get that
right at the beginning.
Straight out of the back. Because if you go into the details of your product, if you're pitching an app or a new piece of hardware and you're going talking about megapixels or processor speeds, then, my eyes will gloss over and I'll just press delete.
Yeah. How many emails do you get a day? Mike?
A couple of hundred. Not.
Pitches a day?
Yeah.
Oh, pitches, yeah.
I don't think people realize how many emails you guys get a day. And so you need some way to filter that, right? And so one way is through connections, is someone and they give you good stories, and so you open that email. But I think that people really underestimate storytelling, in PR, and how to tell your story in a way that's provocative. And so, just like you said, you have to catch their attention right in the title, right in the beginning.
You made a good point earlier, which is the opening gambit is really important. Just get to the point quickly. Everybody's super busy. And if you literally sat there and opened every email, you'd never get any work done. So, and you're going to spend a few seconds really deciding whether or not if it's worth you dropping everything to look at this thing, or to move on, and just being very clear, short sentences, 2 or 3 sentences. This is what we're doing. Interested? Yes or no? You want me to send me more information? Whatever. That's okay. Sending a huge long screed of information doesn't really work very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about the best pitch, but I know that probably there is a good technique that works, at least for me. I'm ashamed to say that first they send me an email, then they click I like on Twitter to a post of mine, and then on LinkedIn another like, so they make sure I don't forget them. I shouldn't share this too much.
You're getting stalked.
Yeah.
Playing into your journalist egos, that's always a good way to do it.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Tell them how great they are.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have about the media?
That probably we're just in for a quick hit. Especially with our model, we are doing the quick hit because, we have to get the news headlines out fast, and we have to be first, and we have to be timely. I mean, our model is really very much based on that. But I think at the same time, people forget that, we're very much interested in narrative. And for that, it means that you have to do all the things I said before. You've got to get your people in front of us, and you've got to do it in a format that, really brings out sort of the narrative. I think it's the quick hit misconception.
The people don't understand that you should be thinking about what you're doing in terms of context. Like, who are you competing with? You're going to get asked, like, who do you compete with? What are you actually trying to do? Versus this other company or this other organisation that's doing something else. How are you better? And that you've got to answer that question. Because if you don't ask that question, there's no way for us to contextualize you.
Mm-hmm. I think as well, a lot of the problem is that the media is seen as one big sweaty mass, and it's all the same. But it's not. Like, TechCrunch is completely different from Bloomberg, which is completely different from Forbes, which is different from Vice. And you have to kind of really focus on the area that you want to get the coverage in, and not just kind of see everyone as the same thing. Because obviously, with the whole era of fake news and everything, the conception of media is being challenged constantly every day now. But yeah, I think if you're looking to get someone to talk to you, a journalist to talk to you and cover your story, you need to know who that person is and what that outlet is covering.
I think also you should think about what you're doing in terms of who is the audience that this outlet is served. The people who read Vice, I don't know, who are the people who read are they...
Hands up?
Anyone out there? But they're interested in, often crazy, slightly wacky kind of things, totally things often from the left field that people didn't really know what was going on. General, huge sort of executive C-level audience for Bloomberg or perhaps Forbes probably don't know about the blockchain very much, but you're going to contextualize them that story. But we're interested in serving our readers, and you're interested in serving your viewers, and who that audience is. That's who the journalist is interested in doing. They're interested in their audience. So if you're coming up with something that suits that particular audience, then boom, you've got the right title and the right journalist to talk to.
Yeah. I think people don't understand that when you're writing an article, for example, you're thinking about your audience. How many retweets am I going to get? How many shares am I going to get? How much traffic is this going to bring to my...
I mean, that's a factor, but that obviously we're interested in, or everyone's interested in always having as big an audience as possible. But, who are our readers? And those are the things that you should think about when you're pitching your story.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for all your advice. I hope that you guys have learned something here today. And thank you.
No problem.
Thanks.